There's a trust we place in certain people, a kind of blind faith, especially when we're at our weakest. In a hospital, a nurse's hands are the first ones you look for. They're the ones that bring comfort, that bring medicine, that hold yours when you're scared. In the quiet, snowy landscape of Pine County, Minnesota, there was one nurse everyone called an angel. Her name was Helen Royce. She was calm, she was compassionate, the one you'd want by your side on the worst night of your life. But a terrifying pattern began to emerge in the stillness of her late-night shifts. Patients, even the ones expected to recover, were dying, but only on the night she worked. And on the bedside table of every single one, the lead nurse would find the same strange, cryptic symbol drawn on the death note. A little calling card left by an angel who wasn't just saving lives, she was taking them. Pine County, Minnesota. It's the kind of place that feels a world away from the noise and the chaos of modern life. You get up there, just north of the Twin Cities, and the landscape just sort of opens up. It's a place of dense pine forests that stand silent and watchful, their scent sharp and clean in the cold air. You've got 1,000 little lakes, frozen solid for a good part of the year, their surfaces like polished steel under a pale winter sun. The towns are small, the kind of places where everybody knows everybody, where your family name means something, and where the seasons dictate the rhythm of life. It's a land of hard work, of logging and farming, a place built on a foundation of quiet strength and neighborly trust. People up there, they look out for each other. It's just the way it is. At the heart of this community, like in any small town, is the local hospital. The Pine County Medical Center isn't some sprawling, state-of-the-art facility. It's a modest brick building, a place of profound importance, the one place you go when life hangs in the balance. It's where babies are born, where bones are set, and where, for many, life's final chapter is written. And inside that hospital, there are the nurses, the women and men who are the true lifeblood of the place, the ones who work the long, grueling shifts, who hold the whole fragile system together with their skill, their patience, and their compassion. And in the winter of 2023, there was one nurse in the intensive care unit who everyone agreed was special. Her name was Helen Royce. She was, by all accounts, the perfect nurse. At 52 years old, she had a kind of serene, calming presence that could put even the most anxious patient at ease. She had been a nurse for over 2 decades, and she moved with the kind of quiet confidence of someone who has seen it all. She had these gentle hands, a soft, soothing voice, and eyes that seemed to hold a deep well of empathy. She was the one who would sit with a scared patient in the middle of the night, long after the doctors had made their rounds. She was the one who could explain a complicated medical procedure to a worried family in a way they could actually understand. She was the one who would hold the hand of a dying patient, ensuring they didn't have to face their final moments alone. The younger nurses looked up to her. They called her their mentor. The doctors respected her sharp clinical skills, and the families of her patients, well, they called her an angel. They would write letters to the hospital administration praising her, thanking her for the incredible care she had given their loved ones. Helen Royce wasn't just a nurse, she was an institution, a beloved fixture in the Pine County Medical Center. But there's another side to a hospital, a side that the daytime visitors rarely see. It's the world of the night shift. It's a strange, quiet, almost surreal place. The bright, bustling hallways of the day become dim and silent corridors. The sounds of the hospital change from the constant chatter and beeping to a low, steady hum, punctuated by the soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum and the occasional distant moan of a patient in pain. It's a world where time seems to slow down, where the hours between midnight and dawn can stretch on for an eternity. And it was in this quiet, lonely world of the ICU night shift that a subtle, deeply disturbing pattern began to take shape. It started with a feeling, an unsettling coincidence that was hard to put a finger on. The charge nurse on the night shift was a woman named Brenda Jensen. Brenda was a veteran nurse herself, a no-nonsense, sharp-eyed woman who didn't miss much. She was the one who had to do the paperwork, to sign off on the charts, to officially note the time of death when a patient passed away during her shift. And she started to notice something. It seemed like they were having a run of bad luck. More patients were coding, going into cardiac arrest than usual. More patients were dying unexpectedly. These were patients who were sick, yes. They were in the ICU for a reason. But they were patients who were supposed to be stable, some even on the path to recovery. And then, one night, Brenda noticed the detail that would turn a vague sense of unease into a cold, creeping dread. The deaths, the unexpected ones, they only seemed to happen when Helen Royce was on duty. At first, she dismissed it. It had to be a coincidence. Helen was the best nurse they had. It was just a statistical anomaly, a tragic run of bad luck. But the pattern continued. A Tuesday night, Helen is working. A 70-year-old man recovering from pneumonia suddenly codes and dies. The following Thursday, Helen is on the schedule again. A 65-year-old woman who was stable after a minor heart attack inexplicably passes away. Shift after shift, the pattern held. When Helen was there, the unexpected happened. When she was off, the unit was quiet. It was a correlation that Brenda couldn't ignore, but it was also a conclusion that was so monstrous, so unthinkable that her mind recoiled from it. To even consider that Helen Royce, the angel of Pine County, could be involved, it was a betrayal of everything she knew to be true. Then came the symbol. It was Brenda's job to fill out the initial report when a patient passed. It was a simple form, the death note, that was placed on the bedside table with the patient's chart for the doctor to review in the morning. And on the corner of the note for the man who died on that Tuesday, Brenda noticed a small, hand-drawn symbol. It was a simple, stylized drawing of a bird, almost like a tiny dove, drawn in black ink. She thought it was odd, maybe a doodle from a family member, but then on the death note of the woman who died on Thursday, it was there again. The exact same symbol. A cold wave of fear washed over Brenda. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a signature, a calling card. She went back and looked at the paperwork from the other recent unexpected deaths, and on every single one that had occurred during Helen Royce's shift, there it was, the tiny silent bird, a cryptic symbol left at the scene of each death. Brenda Jensen was now faced with an impossible choice. What do you do when you suspect the unthinkable? Who do you tell when the person you suspect is the most trusted, most beloved person on your staff? For days, she was paralyzed by the weight of her discovery. She was terrified of being wrong, of destroying the reputation of a good woman with a wild, unsubstantiated accusation. But she was even more terrified of being right. She was terrified that if she said nothing, another patient would die. Finally, her conscience won out. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, she went to the hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. Eris Thorne. In the sterile quiet of his office, Brenda laid out her concerns. She showed him the charts, the timelines, the death notes with the strange repeating symbol. Dr. Thorne listened, his face a mask of professional calm, but Brenda could see the color draining from his cheeks. He, too, had known and respected Helen Royce for years. The accusation was almost impossible to process, but the evidence Brenda presented, the pattern, was too clear, too specific to be ignored. They knew they couldn't go to the police yet. They had no proof, only a horrifying suspicion. They needed more. They needed to know how. If Helen was doing something, how was she doing it without anyone noticing? Dr. Thorne made a difficult decision. He initiated a quiet internal audit of the ICU's pharmacy records, specifically focusing on the medications dispensed during Helen Royce's shifts. The pharmacy in a hospital is a fortress of protocols and procedures. Every single dose of a powerful drug is tracked, logged, and accounted for. The audit team began to cross-reference the patient charts with the pharmacy's dispensing records. For days, they found nothing amiss. The drugs administered to the patients who had died all matched their charts. And then they found it. A tiny discrepancy, but a significant one. They noticed that on the nights of the unexpected deaths, there were unusually high withdrawals of two specific drugs from the automated dispensing cabinet, insulin and potassium chloride. These are common hospital medications, but in high, unprescribed doses, they are also lethal and notoriously difficult to detect any standard autopsy. An overdose of insulin can cause a person's blood sugar to plummet, inducing a fatal hypoglycemic shock that mimics a natural cardiac event. An injection of potassium chloride can stop the heart almost instantly, and the chemical dissipates from the bloodstream so quickly that it's virtually untraceable unless a medical examiner is specifically looking for it. The record showed that Helen Royce had been accessing these drugs, and while some of the withdrawals were logged for her assigned patients, others were unaccounted for, or logged under the names of patients who hadn't been prescribed them. It was the how. She was using her knowledge, her access, and her trusted position to obtain the perfect murder weapons, drugs that would kill silently and leave almost no trace. Dr. Thorne now had enough. The horrifying suspicion had hardened into a near certainty. He made the phone call that would shatter the peace of Pine County. He called the police. The case was handed to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the state's top investigative agency. The lead agent was a man named David Cole, a quiet, meticulous investigator with a reputation for handling complex, sensitive cases. Cole and his team knew they were walking into a minefield. Accusing a beloved nurse of being a serial killer based on circumstantial evidence was a monumental task. The public outcry would be immense. The defense would paint them as villains, persecuting an innocent, life-saving angel. They had to build an absolutely airtight case. Their investigation began in the shadows. They couldn't just arrest Helen. They needed to catch her in the act or find irrefutable proof. They worked with the hospital to set up a covert surveillance operation in the ICU. Tiny, hidden cameras were installed, so small they were almost invisible. They also began a deep dive into Helen Royce's life, trying to answer the one question that loomed over everything. Why? Who was Helen Royce, really? On the surface, her life was as calm and orderly as her professional demeanor. She was a widow, her husband having died of cancer a decade earlier. She lived alone in a neat, modest house on the outskirts of town. She had no children. She was a devout churchgoer, a regular volunteer at community events. She had no financial problems, no known vices. She was, by all accounts, a pillar of the community. But as the investigators peeled back the layers, they began to uncover a more complex and disturbing portrait. They interviewed former colleagues from other hospitals where she had worked earlier in her career, and they found a similar, though less pronounced, pattern. There had been whispers, rumors of an unusually high death rate on her shifts at a previous hospital. Nothing was ever proven, no formal investigation was ever launched, but the whispers were there. It seemed that the Angel of Pine County may have had a history. They also uncovered a hidden psychological element. In her personnel files, they found old performance reviews. While most were glowing, a few contained subtle notes of concern. They described Helen as someone who seemed to thrive in crisis, who appeared almost energized by the adrenaline of a code blue emergency. She was often the first one to leap into action. Her performance in a crisis was flawless and almost heroic. But they also noted that she seemed to have a deep-seated need for control and a craving for the praise and adoration she received from the families of her patients, particularly the grieving ones. The investigators began to suspect that they were dealing with a case of angel of death syndrome, a psychological profile of a caregiver who kills their patients. The motives for such killers are complex.
Sometimes it's a hero complex, where they create a crisis so they can be the one to save the day, and when they fail, they are still praised for their valiant efforts. Sometimes it's a twisted form of a mercy killing, where the caregiver believes they are ending a patient's suffering, giving them the power of God. And sometimes it's about the ultimate thrill of control, the power over life and death itself. For Helen, it seemed to be a toxic cocktail of all three. She was creating the emergencies that made her feel alive, and she was basking in the gratitude of the families she was simultaneously comforting and destroying. While the background investigation was building a picture of the why, the surveillance operation was waiting for the when. For several weeks, the ICU was quiet. Helen Royce was a model of perfect nursing. The investigators began to worry. Had she sensed something? Had she stopped? Then, one night, it happened. A 78-year-old man named George Peterson was in the ICU. He was recovering from a fall, but he was stable, alert, and was scheduled to be moved out of the ICU the next day. He was a perfect low-risk target. The hidden camera in his room, a tiny lens disguised as a screw head on a piece of medical equipment, was rolling. The footage is chilling in its banality. It shows Helen Royce entering the room, her movements calm and professional. She checks his vitals, adjusts his pillows. She speaks to him in her usual soothing voice. Then, with her back to the camera, she fiddles with his IV live. She is in the room for less than a minute. Then she leaves. 20 minutes later, the monitors in George Peterson's room begin to scream. He has gone into sudden cardiac arrest. The night shift team, Helen among them, rushes into the room. They work on him for nearly half an hour, a frantic, desperate effort to save his life. But they can't. George Peterson is pronounced dead.
The next morning, before the day shift arrived, Brenda Jensen, now working with the police, went to the room to collect the chart. And there, on the corner of the death note, drawn in Helen's neat, precise handwriting, was the symbol, the tiny bird. The investigators now had it all. They had the pattern. They had the means from the pharmacy records. They had the motive from the psychological profile. And now they had the act itself, captured on video. The arrest of Helen Royce sent a tidal wave of shock and disbelief through Pine County. It was front-page news. The angel of the ICU? A serial killer? It was impossible. It had to be a mistake. Her friends, her colleagues, her pastor, they all rallied to her defense. They described her as the kindest, most compassionate person they had ever known. The community was torn in two. How could the woman who had held their hands, who had cried with them, who had cared for their dying loved ones, be a monster? But the evidence was overwhelming. The exhumation of several of the victims' bodies, now with medical examiners looking for specific toxins, confirmed lethal, unprescribed doses of insulin or potassium in their systems. The trial was a spectacle. The small county courthouse was packed every day. The prosecution, led by a sharp state prosecutor, laid out their case with methodical, devastating precision. They presented the statistical evidence of the deaths on her shifts. They showed the pharmacy records. They played the chilling surveillance video of her in George Peterson's room, a silent movie of a murder. And they presented the death notes, one after another, each one bearing the same cryptic avian signature. The defense's strategy was to attack the hospital and the other nurses. They argued that the hospital was understaffed and chaotic, that the pharmacy records were a mess. They tried to paint Brenda Jensen as a jealous rival, a woman who had fabricated the story to ruin Helen's career. They claimed the deaths were all tragic but natural occurrences, and that the police, under pressure to solve the case, had simply found a convenient scapegoat in Helen Royce. Helen herself took the stand. It was a calculated risk, but her only chance. On the stand, she was the picture of a wronged woman. She was calm, articulate, and deeply sympathetic.
She cried as she described her love for her patients, her dedication to her profession. She portrayed herself as the victim of a terrible witch hunt. Her performance was so convincing that for a moment it seemed to sow a seed of doubt. But under a grueling cross-examination, her composure began to crack. When the prosecutor confronted her with the surveillance video, with the death notes, with the symbol, her answers became evasive. She couldn't explain the symbol. She called it a doodle, a nervous habit. But she couldn't explain why this nervous habit only appeared on the notes of patients who had died unexpectedly on her shift. The jury saw through the performance. They saw the coldness behind the compassionate eyes. After a 6-week trial, the jury, made up of the very people from the community she had served and betrayed, found Helen Royce guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. The judge, calling her actions the ultimate betrayal of trust and an act of pure evil disguised as compassion, sentenced her to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The Angel of Pine County would spend the rest of her life in a cage. The case left a deep, painful wound on the community. The trust in the one place that was supposed to be a sanctuary of healing was shattered. How many other victims were there? How many deaths over her 20-year career had been attributed to natural causes when they were in fact the work of her gentle, murderous hands? It's a question that will likely never be answered. The story of Helen Royce is a terrifying exploration of the darkness that can hide behind the most benevolent of masks. It's a story of a woman who is addicted to the power over life and death, who turned a place of healing into her own private hunting ground. And it's a chilling reminder that the line between an angel of mercy and an angel of death can sometimes be as thin and as sharp as a hypodermic needle.